Hello folks, the Celtic Nerd here, bringing you another nerdy video. And once again, we are back talking about Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I'll be talking about episode 5. Hold on, I'm blanking on the name of the episode. I literally just finished the episode, at which point my Disney Plus started crashing. Yeah, I think it's just a server issue, considering that the new Percy Jackson episode just went online, but they've also premiered, Marvel's Echo. So there's probably a lot of traffic. A God buys us cheeseburgers. So there we go. That's the name of the episode. It is episode 5. And okay, this is by far the funniest episode. Like, oh my god. It is the funniest episode. The actor who they so in this episode, it starts off. Sorry, once again, I just need to have a disclaimer in terms of at the start of this video, because I feel like it is very important to bring this up. Just as a repeated reminder, folks, okay? Now, anything that I say during this. Anything I say about this episode is purely in just my opinion. In the end, like, I am not saying what I would desire is better or worse, than what is presented in this show. And that is because Rick Riordan, who wrote Percy Jackson and the Olympians and all the other books related to that universe of the fandom, like, he is an executive producer and he's a writer, and he recently did an interview defending the changes he made to the book, to keep things simple, because I've already talked about this in the previous episode when I was talking about episode 4, which was literally, this is the same day that I'm recording this, so I've literally just repeated this. But just to keep it simple, he wanted his longtime fans that have read the book, to be able to discover and, like, enjoy the movie. Sorry, this series. He wants this series to be a little different than the books. So far, the overall story is roughly the same. Like, they're still hitting the same story beats. So again, this is not like what happened with the movies, where they made so many changes, and some of the changes were so drastic they effectively made some of the events of the other books completely pointless. So yeah, just keep that in mind, folks, okay? Now, we pretty much start off exactly where we left off in the previous episode. We cut away. We see Percy floating in the river, but then we immediately cut away to the art, like a far shot of the arch. So no, Percy resurfaces from the water. We see that there's a billowing smoke from the arch, presumably from the fire. We then cut to Annabeth and Grover trying to figure things out. Now, the scene that I talked about in episode 1 finally comes up, and that is the image of the Fates. We see the three Fates, knitting on a bench, as they look at Annabeth and Grover. Annabeth is the one that notices them, and she's the one that is very concerned. She's ignoring what Grover is saying, as Grover is trying to get her attention due to the fact that the police are, staring at her and him. He's very nervous as she goes, "We need to go look for Percy." She is very adamant that Percy is alive. I believe her spark of... I feel like her determination to find Percy alive is sparked by the fact that she saw the Fates snipping a cord. And a part of her is telling her that, like, okay, Percy must be dead, but the rest of her is like, no, no, he's still alive. So they go off to find him. Now, this is one thing I am a little disappointed about, but again, I can understand why they decided to do it, because I can imagine they do not want to saturate this show with CGI or suspend disbelief too much. I don't know the reasons. I am sure. I hope there is a good reason, but I imagine they have their reasons. But in the book series, Percy has, when Percy is in water, he cannot get wet. He can breathe underwater, and he can still swim. Like he can even, like, he can still swim and whatnot. However, he does not physically get wet, and neither does anything he is in direct contact with. In the book, in the exact same scene, he experiments with this, and he even picks up an old lighter and a piece of garbage that's floating in the river, and they instantly become dry, and he's actually able to light the paper on fire with the lighter. But once he lets them go, they immediately get, snuffed out by the water. He has a fairly long conversation with the nymph in the book. We do not see the conversation that they had, strangely enough, in yeah, we don't get that conversation here. It's a little frustrating, but he's climbed out and he's soaking wet. But again, I don't know, understand why they didn't. We have a nice moment between Annabeth and Percy as she rushes over and hugs him. And they pretty much explain that they're being blamed for the train and the arch. So I feel like this is an escalation on, like, this, of why Percy. This is an interesting alternative to Percy being wanted by the police and FBI, as opposed to the way he is portrayed in the books. In the books, he is mostly wanted for the FBI due to the disappearance of his mother, and what happened to the car. The fact that he disappeared as well, but then he suddenly reappears, attacking a bunch of old ladies, and the bus exploded. Now again, we did not get the bus in the live action series, so that scene is not up. But then immediately to this situation with the arch. See, now I am confused why the police are so interested in them, in the kids, because of the arch scene. Because I don't know if anyone saw Annabeth pull the fire extinguisher, um, or like if there was no one who really saw Percy alone up there with Echidna. In the book, there was a parent and a kid and some other person who was up there with Percy, and they are the ones that describe Percy, and they basically describe what happened from their point of view as they're seeing things through the mist. I don't know how we don't get a full clear image of what they saw, or at least what they thought they saw, between Percy's fight and the Chimera. But it is safe to assume that they do give a decent description of Percy, and then with the destruction of the arch, that's why then Percy is, wanted. However, as I said, there was no, if anyone who saw episode 4, if you're listening to this, or watching this, well, it's about listening mainly. If you saw episode 4, there was no one up there with Percy and the Echidna and the Chimera. So there's no one really to give Percy's description. So I'm a little curious about. Now, mind you, I think we get a bit more of an explanation later down the line. But again, it's the approach of why Percy's wanted by the FBI is not fully addressed as well as I would like, but it's still an interesting explanation of what's going on with Percy later down the line. Now, so they're not sure how they're supposed to travel to continue their journey west, so they just start walking because they can't do anything that involves buying tickets. So they're walking along the highway, possibly hoping to basically hitchhike their way there. When Percy basically talks about like how, look guys, we I know we need to. Our main goal is to retrieve the Master Bolt, but like we need to also take into consideration like who stole it. Like maybe we need to be a bit of detectives here. And Grover and Annabeth just give him a look, and he's like, "I'm the last person to realize that, right?" And they both just sort of nod, and he's like, "Oh, right." So like Percy come to realize. We also have a nice moment between him and them talking about his relationship with his father. Like he feels like the fact that his dad saved him. It's like he saved me, guys. I like it's the beginning of him warming up to Poseidon, which he which towards the end of the series is one of the few gods he's on good terms with. Personally, all the other gods he's either not on solid ground or he just flat out hates them. Like like with Percy, a lot of them are neutral or they just dislike each other. There are very few gods which he will acknowledge that he actually likes, Poseidon being one of the ones that he likes. So it's a nice, we're seeing a nice little moment of him, starting to like his style. It's a very sweet moment. Now, they hear an engine coming up behind them, and Anima points out it's a motorcycle. So we see that this is our introduction to Ares. It's a bit of a funny moment as Grover and Annabeth try and dissuade this motorcyclist, like, "Oh no, we don't need help. You can go on." But obviously the motorcyclist is just like, "I'm not going out. You guys are not going to make it. There's only a few days to the solstice." They realize, okay, this must be someone who's in the know, and they quickly discover that this is Ares. Ares explains to them that he'll meet them at a diner. Do not dawdle, and he'll give them advice on their quest. They reluctantly head over, and this is what the now the this version of Ares is by far the funniest. He in the book he comes off as basically just your stereotypical asshole bully, but like he's not in this. In this, it's just fucking hilarious. I'm not gonna go into full details. You guys should discover it yourselves. But he does hold up his phone because we see him laughing at something before as they were walking in, and he shows them, and it is Percy's stepdad doing an interview and basically blaming him for the disappearance of his mother and his car. You get a hint that he's more concerned about his car briefly, but basically they're alluding to Percy possibly killing his mother. And so now Ares explains like he's wanted by the FBI. So if they were planning on hitchhiking their way to Hades, it's not going to happen. If they were to attempt that, very quickly they will be picked up by the FBI, and that their quest is ultimately doomed to fail. Ares also explains why he loves his family, and it's because of the fact that they're constantly fighting one another. And he tells them, "Look, Zeus deep down wants a war with Poseidon, so it doesn't even matter if they retrieve the Master Bolts. There's going to be a war." So again, like it's just his portrayal, and then it gets even funnier later down the line. He then makes them an offer. They go get his shield from a nearby amusement park, and he will make arrangements for them to possibly get to Hades within a day. And they're like, "Sure, why not?" Well, reluctantly, especially when he says, "Just to make sure you come back, I'm keeping the Sayer as collateral." which initially they're refusing to do, but Grover is like, fine. And Grover clearly has a plan. In the next scene, uh, we cut away then to Annabeth and Percy arriving at the museum. Actually, sorry, we go back to Grover and Ares. Sorry, briefly before that. And Grover basically says, "We met before at the winter solstice." And he basically. Ares is just like, "Oh, protester." And he's like, "No, I'm actually a fan." So Grover starts spinning this whole spiel about how he's a fan of Ares, and he starts mentioning some wars, and then Ares like, "But no one died." It's like, "Yeah, but it was yeah. I'm more a fan of your melon something work, you know, super aggressive power, quick surrenders, and so he's basically treating like all the wars over the years now, because again Ares is the god of war. You know, he has his hand in basically creating them. Like his existence sort of begets the creation of war, basically. And he sort of talks about them as if either an author or like it's not super clear, but it's like a music like talking to a musician and then talking about their earlier works or even an author. So I find that very hilarious because like the way Aries is talking to him as well, he's like, no one ever talks about them like, you know, like that. Like Aries is actually sort of touched that someone likes his, you know, wars that are not you know, full of bloodshed. So like that was sort of that's a very funny moment. Then we cut to Annabeth and Percy arriving at the amusement park. Now, this is also one of the biggest changes we get because it's in this chapter. It's in this section of the book which sort of begins. I imagine there's probably a lot of debate on where does Percy and Annabeth's romance sort of bloom? Sorry, gets seeded and begins to blossom. Like, I imagine there's some debate. For me, it's, I feel like for me personally, I feel like this is that moment that lays down the little seeds, and then because from this point on, especially starting from the second book, whenever actually yeah, it's from this point and on that whenever Annabeth brings up Luke or anything like that, he feels like a tinge of jealousy. So I feel like this was the moment that sort of like planted the seed and whatnot. Who knows? Uh, Another big change is it turns out Hephaestus built the entire. This is an amusement park that was completely built by Hephaestus, which wasn't in the book. In the book, Hephaestus is involved in this chapter, but he basically just set a trap as opposed to designing the entire amusement park. Sorry, folks, I had a yawn there. Unfortunately, I'm still fairly sore and tired from Lewisboro. I really went all out. I want to start off, you know, my Lewisboro training strong. So I really pushed myself, and waking up early today has sort of certainly drained me. But anyway, continuing on. Um, so yeah, Annabeth and Percy are just wandering through this place. Now it's around here. Percy and Annabeth do get a change of clothes, and Grover get a change of clothes because their clothes are sort of like filthy, or in case of Percy, they're ruined and torn because of what's been going on in their adventures, and they haven't had a chance to, you know, grab clothes because they sort of lost some of their luggage during the bus incident in terms of the book. That doesn't really happen here. Instead, they eventually do just spot a ride, and they decide to investigate. Now it's treated more as like Percy, like Percy does not feel as awkward about it because it's a, one of those like slow, it's like those water rides that's all about romance and all that. He doesn't really feel awkward about that bit. It's more to the fact that this amusement park is creepy as hell, and that ride looks creepy as hell. So that's a big change because it's actually that ride that Hephaestus booby trapped to catch Ares and Aphrodite being together using mechanical spiders and such. The spiders are completely removed from this, which is sort of disappointing because this series seems to be focusing more on Annabeth's fatal flaw, which is her pride, and it also plays heavily into the fact that she was dedicated. She was super dedicated to her, to pleasing her mother, or being her mother's ideal child, and so they're super focusing on those as her character flaws, and one of her big and then when it comes to her strengths, her intelligence, which now in the book, her strengths as a character is her intelligence, obviously, and she does have a lot of combat skill, both strategy and physically, preferring to again use a dagger as opposed to a sword. And her character flaw is her pride and again her devotion to her mother, but then eventually she is quite fear, like she does have one extreme fear. She's not as portrayed as being like fearless per se in the books, but she does have one extreme fear, and that is spiders, which apparently is a common trait by all Athena's kids, due to the fact that spiders tend to just find Athena's children and torment them because of the story between I cannot, Arachne and Athena, the whole sewing competition, and the Arachne woman being turned into a spider monster, and it's believed that she is the mother of all spiders, and as such, her children will seek out and torment Athena's children. So, which would often lead to arachnophobia in Athena's children because, again, they are not understanding why these spiders keep swarming them or biting them when they're very young. So, we instead of getting that revelation, they're really heavily playing into like Annabeth being fearless, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm starting to have an issue with it. After, like, I was liking their portrayal of Annabeth up until this point, because they're slowly. It feels like there's like Annabeth might be a Mary Sue. Like she seems to be very good at everything, and I'm not seeing as many character flaws, um, in this series. Like she doesn't doubt herself. She seems to be like very good and successful at almost everything she does, and yeah, it's I'm just not seeing it. Like in terms of the book, this moment really showcases she does have a weakness, which is again like her fear of spiders is paralyzing. She literally freaks out and is unable to do anything. Her she's literally paralyzed with fear, and it's a fear that hangs with her that she does not even come remotely close to overcoming until, let's see, Sea of Monsters, Titan's Curse, Battle of the Labyrinth, Last Olympian, Lost Hero, Son of Neptune. I think Athena's Curse. So about eight or sorry, I actually lost count. About eight, like at least five plus books later. It takes a long time for her to actually tackle that fear of her. And again, she has other character flaws such as like her pride and arrogance, which is played up a lot. But we also see her like acknowledge it, and it's again like I feel like the like book Annabeth was a lot better well written, and I feel like a part of me is just I'm starting to not like the the Annabeth. Again, it has nothing to do with the actress. It's just the way she's being written. You know, it's like this whole super lack of fear and her seemingly able and she's seemingly good at everything she's done, and like it just seems super weird, you know. Like whereas with Percy, we see Percy struggling constantly through this series, and yeah. So this, in terms of Annabeth, this is one of her weakest episodes in my opinion. Like it has her weakest moments as a character, but it also has one of her strongest moments as a character so far. Um, because we lose that scene of seeing her as we see her as a vulnerable character. We see her vulnerable. We see her vulnerable. We see that um, Percy and Annabeth ride the ride, and again we have a great moment of sort of Percy being the one who knows the Greek myths instead of Annabeth, which again is sort of a nice little change. Normally it was Annabeth that gave this information, but instead they're giving it to Percy. So Percy knows his myths, so which is a cool thing. And he's basically telling, like he's explaining that this light show that is suddenly being played in the on the ride is the story of Hephaestus, and he's saying like me. He's just being like the gods are so mean to it, to one another, like, and Annabeth, and he's like maybe you're right. Maybe my mom was trying to keep me away from this. Maybe she was making a mistake. She didn't prepare me enough. Whereas Annabeth then cuts in and she's like, I think she was preparing you. She was preparing you to not be like the gods, so that to not be backstabby and power seeking and glory seeking. You know, so Annabeth is opening up. Like like we're starting to see that like she's Annabeth has we sort of saw it in I think the previous episode. Annabeth's starting to open up. She's starting to see like the flaws in her way of thinking. Now, again, we still get in a Hephaestus trap, and the trap is sort of interesting. It's another pull from mythologies. So the previous trap in the book was still pulled. It was a play on the net, the story of Hephaestus catching Ares and Athena together, and he throws a golden net on them and then then subsequently embarrasses them in front of all of Mount Olympus. It's still a play on that story, but again, it's done in a fairly different way. Whereas this is more of a story about um, how Hephaestus was both rejected by Hera and Athena. and how he ended up actually getting married to Aphrodite. Like, because he, in the story, he traps Hera on a golden throne, and none of the gods could get her off, and he only released Hera if she agreed to make. Now, Hera has this sort of, I guess, has this authority because she is the goddess of marriage and family. So he agreed to only release Hera if she agreed to make Aphrodite his wife. And so yeah, we get a very good emotional scene of Percy and Annabeth struggling to, like, they're basically fighting, arguing with each other because that's the trap this time. There's a trap there. They see the shield, they see a throne, and it's like, okay, one of us has to sacrifice ourselves in order to get the shield. Which now, I have a problem with this change, personally. Again, this is just my opinion, but this makes it so that this is not exactly a trap for Ares and Aphrodite. It's, I don't know why this is a thing Hephaestus would have set up, because this is clearly a setup for for non selfish people, I guess. Because like what was Hephaestus's plan with this trap? I don't know Hephaestus's plan. His, at least his plan in the book, involved, like, what made sense, because he wanted to embarrass, because, like, not only were the spiders, and the nets, and the spiders would have, repeatedly bitten and annoyed, Ares and Aphrodite, but he also had cameras set up to, broadcast to Mount Olympus. So that would have been funny, and it would have embarrassed Aphrodite and Ares. But I don't understand the plan. Now, Ares and Aphrodite saw through the thing, and they both, fucking legged it before the trap was sprung. Both leaving behind an object. Aphrodite left her, a handkerchief, which Percy was about to rub against his cheek, but Annabeth, snatched it from, and was like, "Oh, no, no, we don't need any love magic, here." And we actually see that, handkerchief in. Oh no, sorry, it was a scarf. We see that scarf, in the next book, later down the line. Like, it's Percy's like, "Wow, why did Annabeth keep this?" Because it was placed there for storage. Because Annabeth wasn't there. So Percy was like, "Oh wow." So it's, again, once again, a nice moment. Like, it lays down the foundations and the hints that Annabeth may have feelings for Percy, because she kept it. But there was also Irish Shield, so again, both of them left such a hurry. They both left something behind. I don't understand why Ares left his shield there. It's the amusement park scene, like the amusement park parts in, this episode, are they are there are some really nice elements of it, yes. Like I said, like Percy talking about his mother, telling the story of how Hephaestus was rejected both by his own mother and Aphrodite, and how he ended up getting married to Aphrodite. But other than that, oh sorry, there is more good moments. Again, like, also Percy and Annabeth arguing with each other, because clearly they have become friends, and Annabeth is refusing to sacrifice Percy, even though that's why he picked her to go on the quest, because he was sure she would sacrifice him. They have a nice touching moment where Annabeth's like, I won't leave Hades without getting your mother." And he's like, "Well, I was going to make you a promise, to come back here after the quest, and get me out off this thing." And she was like, as if that was, any kind of question. Like she was going to do that regardless. He was like, "Just making sure." And then he sits down. He gets slowly turned into a golden statue. And then Annabeth instead of leaving with the shield, she spends a lot of time trying to figure out how to get Percy out. She's refusing to leave without him. then Hephaestus shows up. And it's ultimately Hephaestus. Like, Annabeth gives a speech about how Percy is better than the gods, because he's not like them, and what she used to be like. So again, we saw how Percy's attitude and personality has sort of like now changed Annabeth's point of view because of the fact that he was so willing to sacrifice himself for, you know, her and Grover. Again, it is a nice moment. This is a strong moment for Annabeth, but again, I feel like the rest, again, Hephaestus listening to this and he's like, wow. And he plays a song and releases Percy, and he's like, not all of us want to be like that as well. I'll put in a good word with your mother, and then he leaves. So Percy has not met Hephaestus just yet. He's seen him, but he has not met him. Again, I have some issues. I'm just like, what was his plan here? Like, what? Like, okay, so he probably showed up because he found out, oh, someone sprung my trap. But why did he care about the trap? Like, what was the trap set up to do? Like, was Ares going to sit in the chair himself? Was his plan for Ares to show up and then realize, oh, I need someone to I need to sacrifice someone to get my shield back. Like, it's just super not clear what Hephaestus' plan was, and like, again, I feel like the Hephaestus trap was better done in the book, and also it sort of, Percy also is like disliking of Hephaestus a little because of this moment, because it's just a nuisance, and again, it also helps cement his dislike for Ares. Now we then cut back to Ares and Grover talking, and Ares talks about how he dislikes children in general. He even dislikes his own kids. He likes them a bit better, but he still dislikes them. Because of it's this whole like, oh, look at me, I hurt my knee, you know, like clearly he does not like his children. Um, but yeah, Grover is clearly trying to get information out of Ares. He's burring him up. It's a really cool moment for Grover. Like, Grover is being a detective. He is sweet talking Ares, the god of fucking war. He's even Grover is even saying bad things about Athena. Like, he's agreeing with all the bad things that Ares is saying about Athena to even get like more, to try and worm information out of Ares. Which, funny enough, now the gods in Percy Jackson are treated as being both omniscient and not omniscient. Like, they are aware of when someone badmouths them and whatnot. But I feel like if Athena was to be able to know what Grover and Ares was talking about, like she was able to overhear him, I feel like she would appreciate what Grover is really up to. She'd be like, "Ooh, that is a wise tactic you're doing, manipulating your opponent's emotion to get the information you need." So I feel like she wouldn't actually be mad at Grover. I feel like she would be applauding Grover to playing to Ares' weakness, which is just brute strength, and that is another thing we sort of lost with. See, in the thing, Percy, Grover and Annabeth are supposed to be scared of Ares. They're supposed to be like very if not scared, very at least very nervous talking to him because of at the fact that he is a god. Where it's Percy that was disrespectful throughout the encounter. It's more Annabeth being disrespectful to Ares instead of Percy, and it's actually this moment. It's Percy's attitude that then warns him which then reminds him of something that he remembers towards the end of the book. And I can't really talk about it now because then it'll be a big spoiler, so I'm not going to talk about it. But yeah, that's so yeah. Grover buttering up Ares, getting information out of him, really fucking cool. Loved it. Uh, Next, we get Ares. Ares explains to them his plan of getting them to Hades. He says this truck is going to go. It's going to bring you to Las Vegas, at the Lotus Museum. Sorry, the Lotus in Las Vegas. Then from which Hermes likes to hang out, and he's like, talk to Hermes. His driver will then get you the rest of the way, and you'll get there, by sunset tomorrow. So that is Ares' plan. He tosses them a bag as well, so he gives them some supplies basically, and they get in. Now the episode ends with Grover saying like, "I know who stole the Master Bolt." Then it cuts to black. So episode 5 is positives. It is easily the funniest episodes. It has some very good character moments for it has some very good character moments for Grover and Percy, as well as even Ares. There are some good positive moments about with Annabeth, but the negatives is the Hephaestus trap makes absolutely no sense. Again, the Annabeth Annabeth feels like a little bit of a Mary Sue up now at this moment. But again, it's more to do with the fact that we did not get her fatal moment. She didn't. If I'm going to be honest with you, I did not feel like she was. She had the makings of a Mary Sue in episode 1, 2, and 3, and 4, but I sort of ignored them a little bit because of the fact that I was expecting, her big, weakness, which is her fear of spiders or anything creepy crawly. But the fact that that's been removed and they're essentially portraying her as being completely fearless, because even Ares brings it up. To me, I'm not a fan of that. The fact that she apparently has no fear, not a fan of it. But other than that, so like this, I will say this episode has, in my opinion, easily some of the best moments of the series so far, but also some of the weakest moments of the series so far. It's a strange hypocrisy. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you folks. I am just super glad that I managed to get this done. With also the previous episode done as well. As I said at the start, I am essentially recording these videos back to back because I forgot to do the episode 4 video last week. So now I'm getting to it now. So here I am. But yeah, again, there's just some elements. They did not lean too much into the biker motif of Ares, which I feel like they could have done it a lot better. But again, he's still a biker, and again, I really liked. I really liked how they had Ares act. He was a bit humorous. He's a bit chaotic. Really enjoying it. Well, this is the Celtic Nerd signing out. One name, one sky.